All right, we are now recording. Thank you everyone for joining tonight. We're just a few minutes late and I'm trying to monitor that our guests are here, most 2 out of 3. And I have a 4th presentation if Matt said he'd be a little bit later on the agenda. If he didn't come in exactly when we put him, he would be in later. So I have my usual request. Is there anybody willing to take notes tonight?
Gabrielle's got her hand up.
The proverbial long silence.
I'll do it, but it probably is time that somebody else think about if they're capable of doing it next time, and maybe I can alternate with somebody on a regular basis. That'd be great.
That would be great. I will send out an email after this asking because let's just get business moving so we don't have to do this every time. Thank you. Okay, and I am going to warn you that I am watching my email because that Good Samaritan law thing is still, it's going to be held in committee tomorrow morning, and they called me or they sent an email at 4:58 with some news, and so I'm having a reactionary discussion with the legal counsel for the legislator down there. So we'll see if he's still working. And so I just watched that. So we have a couple of guest speakers today, so we're going to let them go ahead and go. Curry Mayer is our almost newly confirmed director of the Office of Emergency Management. I watched the city council give her a good scrubbing in her committee meeting confirmations the other day. Welcome to Seattle. So I'm going to let Curry take a few minutes to introduce herself to you. I don't know that she can stay for the whole time. And Curry, I'm sorry, we don't have the time to have everybody introduce themselves, but these are folks from all over Seattle and all the different neighborhood hubs. And you have to unmute. Where did you go?
Yeah,
There we
go. Hi. Thank you, Cindy. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And hello, everyone. Thanks for your time tonight. I'm excited to see you, and I look forward to being in the same room with you, and also a time where we can all chat and I can hear all about what you're doing and what's happening with you. As Cindy mentioned, yes, actually I've been to the public safety committee twice with city council, and then I go to so they've approved me out of committee, and then I will go to the full council on Tuesday. So looking forward to that. Anyway, I started on December 16th, and just a tiny bit about my background. I came from across the pond, so I spent 4 years with the city of Bellevue in emergency management. But prior to that, I was in California, where I spent over 20 years in emergency management up and down the state. So started in Southern California and then made my way up to Northern California. Worked for 3 different governors, worked for the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. I have a lot of EOC experience, worked in the Bay Area and in Sacramento for the majority of my career, both with local government and a number of state agencies. Excuse me. So here I am, super excited to be in Seattle, and really honored to be with the amazing OEM team, who I know you all know. Carrie is amazing. Both Carries, Matt, who I believe is also speaking tonight. And yeah, it's just a really great group. I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for the work that you do, involving the community and helping people get prepared, and all of the education and outreach that you do is so important, because really emergency management is about resilience building. And the best way we do that is, through neighborhood groups and people interacting with the people they know, and looking for those groups and organizations that they haven't met yet, and kind of spreading the news and talking to people about how they can be prepared. So I feel really strongly that that's probably the most important thing that we do. And everything else, all the planning and mitigation and everything else we do supports those efforts. So community resiliency. And I really believe that community preparedness is really powerful, more powerful, I think, than than individual preparedness. So thank you. I applaud your efforts. And I'm super excited that we have such a great group that's connected to Seattle OEM. Oh, and just so you know, for this year, in addition to the things that we're continuing to support the citywide efforts with COVID and how we get vaccines out, OEM is pivoting a little bit and going back to some of our more traditional hazards. When I say traditional, the ones that we tend to plan for all the time. So there'll be a big focus on earthquake, everything about earthquakes this year. So awareness, preparedness, mitigation, and everything that we can do to kind of move people's focus back to earthquakes. And as you know, at the end of February is the anniversary of the Nisqually earthquake. The mayor that's also a priority for the mayor, earthquake preparedness. So we'll be able to have her engaged in a lot of those activities that we're doing as well. So, and the full range. So not only working with the community and my staff and all of the department, my team and all the departments, but also with the executive staff. The Naval Postgraduate School is going to come and do a seminar with our department heads so we can look at what are those policy issues that they need to think about. And if you have ideas or things that you think we should focus on, I'd love to hear that. And also I'm available. So please feel free to reach out or give me a call. I'm happy to chat with you. So with that, I'll give it back to Cindy. And
well, I'll ask you to repeat one thing. I think you said it to both the ACS team and to during your confirmations, your emphasis on practices and drills, because that's what we are all about too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So that's probably my favorite thing to do is training and exercises. And I spent a lot of time doing that in California. And I was an instructor at there's a training institute in California called the California Specialized Training Institute, where people come from all over the country to learn everything about all different types of disasters. So I was an instructor there first, a course manager, and then I was the director for several years. And I really believe that's how you help people, learn that muscle memory, right? You do teach people about things you want them to do the training piece, and then exercise, because that's really how you figure out how do we really do this. So yes, I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of community exercises as well, and would love to support your efforts. If you're going to do those kinds of things this year, please let me know. So we can, one, talk about the great work that you're doing, and also if you need our support, we're happy to do that too. So yes, huge fan of training and exercises.
Well, good. I hope we can do that. Is there any questions that anybody has? And I'm not sure I messed up this, but I pinned her for a while and now I've unpinned her. So let's see what happens. Questions from anyone?
What's the status of funding for OEM, in the current climate?
Yeah, we're in good shape for this year. As you are probably aware, we're moving out of SPD, and officially we are no longer connected to the police department. But as you might imagine, there's a lot of administrative things that need to happen to make that occur. Make all those move them over. So we're now an independent department, and we are in good shape for this year. UASI funding is changing a little bit, but as you may be aware, the UASI projects that the Urban Area Security Initiative grant funds, we ask for the money now, and then we're not able to spend that money for 2 years from now. So we're planning ahead, and they've changed their criteria a little bit about how that's going to work. They're actually providing the opportunity for more jurisdictions to be able to compete for that funding, but that's down the road. And we're still in good shape because for the city of Seattle, we're ranked pretty high for the threats that we're supposed to be vulnerable to. So we're in good shape. And I see Darren. Hey, shout out to Darren.
Hi,
Darren, good to see you. Darren and I work together with a one of the Washington Centers of Excellence, and also through the Community College Network. So good to see you.
You too. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for being here also.
Oh, yeah, you bet. Happy to. Thanks for having me.
We have a couple minutes for more questions. Anybody else?
Oh, yeah, looks like Bill has a question.
Yeah,
Go.
just a quick question. What is your stance and possible future concerning CERT training in Seattle? Because Seattle has stepped away from it, unlike the suburbs have still incorporated that.
Yeah, we had a CERT program in Bellevue. I think that the skills that CERT teaches are really good skills. And I don't know, I'd be really interested to hear what you all think of it and how that resonates or not for you. I'm a huge supporter of teaching people skills and doing preparedness in ways that works best for them, and in bringing people together in neighborhoods or hubs or groups, whatever that is. Some people don't like CERT. I'll tell you, I'm not a fan of cribbing. I think it's dangerous and scary. And I personally would never do cribbing. I would be terrified that I would hurt someone. And so, there was a lot of discussion about that, but it's a good program. It works for some people. Other people are not fans. So
I have a question, just as an extension. We were, prior to this pandemic, on the verge of having a drill coordinated with radio and fire.
yeah,
And that was exciting to me, because what I want is to have that alignment.
yeah,
And know that we're part of something, not particularly CERT, because that just puts you in a regiment that may or may not fit. But
right.
I think if we have that, because we are a communication hub,
Yeah.
that would be what I would see would be the breakthrough in terms of future drills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me as well. So I just had a radio training session today with Mark Shepard, and I was talking about getting, having regular radio training for the OEM team as well. So that's definitely something that we could work with ACS and probably do that with you in the not too distant future. Fire is probably won't be able to do it with us for a while because they're heavily involved in vaccinations. So not only, they're paramedics and they're all EMTs giving them, but also the kind of logistics, they have mobile teams and whatnot. But let's definitely explore doing something with the ACS. That's a great idea.
Comment?
Yeah.
Just for information, ACS did go ahead and conduct that exercise with fire on a very socially distanced and
Okay,
safe
good.
method. And it did not involve the hubs. It did not involve us getting in touch with each other physically, but it did work. It was successful. Fire thought it was successful. We learned from it. And there is opportunity going forward to do that again once
Yeah.
fire has the resources to do that and isn't totally committed to COVID vaccinations.
Yeah, great. That's exciting. Yeah, and radios, you're not supposed to be together in the same space, right? To do radio exercise. So yeah.
All right. Any last questions? Last one. All right, Kurt. Sorry.
Yeah, in any large scale emergency, children in the school system are a key part, as we see with COVID, or as we can imagine with an earthquake. And I wonder, with the school system being a separate administrative body from the city, are there any thoughts or plans on how to integrate with the school system, both as a facility owner that has a lot of facilities around the city, but also as a partner in managing a large number of children that are out there in an emergency?
Yeah. Thank you, Randy, for that question. So there's two parts to it. The first part is it's a really good idea. And we should, and I don't know enough about our connection with Seattle Public Schools yet, because I haven't been here long enough. However, I was very, very much we can make that relationship, right? No time like the present. So in Bellevue, we had a really strong relationship with my office there had a strong relationship with the Bellevue School District. And we did exercises with teachers and then also administrators. And then we also worked on, and this would be a cool thing if you guys are interested in helping, we were working on a series of videos that had kids and responders and people from the community. We didn't get to film them because we had COVID, talking about, preparedness topics in little chunks of time, because there's still a lot of kids that don't know, like, what is it? What is a place of refuge? I don't know what that means. And how do I know the fire department's going to come if, something happens at my school? So we could definitely explore that. And I'm also a huge fan of working with the school district. I think that's super important. And you know what else? Kids are the best advertisement when you're trying to get somebody to do something, right? Because they learn it, then they go home and bug their parents forever until they do whatever it is they learned at school. So
We'll
yeah,
definitely-
let's
we'll
do that.
definitely follow up with you on that, because we've
Okay.
had several hub captains trying to work with their schools and they're not getting much support from up above in their
Oh,
system.
okay.
And the OEM has had, now I believe they finally landed on an emergency manager that does come rather consistently, but it was a very tenuous connection for quite a while. So
Okay. So yeah, I'll need all that background from you, and then we'll figure out how to ask in a different way till we get the answer we want.
All right, and you're welcome to stay for the meeting. Randy's presentation next is really, really interesting. He went and
Okay.
responded. It was good.
Okay.
He asked the last question. Thank
Yeah,
you, Julie.
Okay, awesome. I will stay for a while, and thank you.
Okay. Randy,
Reach out if I can help.
yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Randy was a responder down in the Eastern Oregon wildfires. He gave a presentation to ACS, which was part a description of the community response and part a technical discussion. And so hopefully he's carved off, the community side for us. We've got about a half an hour for him tonight. And Randy, the one question for you is, do you want questions as you proceed, or will you stop and let people ask questions at certain points?
It doesn't matter to me. I can be interrupted, and just keep me on time. If you can kind of give me about a 10-minute warning before the end, then I won't end up over time if there's a lot of questions or whatever.
I'll do that.
Cool. Well, thank you for the introduction. My name is Randy Niels. I live in Burien, or as I like to sometimes joke, southwest Seattle, because it's almost southwest Seattle. And I've been a ACS member for quite a while. I know Cindy and a number of you on the group. I'll jump right into what we are doing in Oregon. And hopefully that presentation is coming across.
Yes.
And so Oregon has 65% of its population in the Willamette Valley. And the Willamette Valley includes, Portland down to Eugene. Oregon has a lot of forests, particularly on the Cascade Ocean side of the Cascades. That water, the water that they drink comes from this area. So the Willamette watershed is pretty big, and it includes the Willamette National Forest. There's a couple of big dams. Detroit Dam produces electricity, controls water flow in the river, and this is ultimately where the drinking water for places like Salem come from. And the Cougar Dam, which that dam is about 500 feet tall, and that provides flood control on the Mackenzie River. And ultimately 200,000 people in and around Eugene get their drinking water from the Mackenzie River area, as well as significant hydroelectricity. So to translate that, think about the Tolt watershed and the Cedar watershed around Seattle. Seattle City Light has some hydro generating stations up north in the state. We have a parallel context here where the natural resources for water and electricity come from rural areas that have a lot of trees. Of course, last summer, there was a lot of wildfire in Oregon. Dry conditions, high winds started these around Labor Day. And we all suffered, even up here in Seattle, with wildfire smoke. And of course, this, I think, is in Eugene. We had days not quite this bad in Seattle, but you'll remember those. Detroit was particularly hard hit. A strong windstorm came in and burned the town of Detroit, Oregon, which is a small town. And the townspeople had to escape, including the fire department, and they left their engine and it ended up getting burned. It's not very often you see a fire truck that gets burnt in a fire. It's a striking situation. And our response was as a bunch of internet engineers to the Holiday Farm fire east of Eugene in the Mackenzie River area. So to give a little context, September 7th and 8th, there was a wildfire that started at the Holiday Farm RV park. It's believed to have started from electrical wires coming in contact with the trees. The trees caught on fire. There were strong winds. Conditions were very dry, and 23 miles of utility wires, including electrical and fiber optic cables, were burned off. Now, the area in the red circle on this map is where the fire occurred, but you can see that there are a number of small towns to the right of that on Highway 126. These small towns are the place that we ended up providing service, and these towns were isolated from Eugene. Initially, for several days, the road was impassable because of trees on the road, but they were also isolated because they didn't have electricity. They didn't have any kind of telecommunications. The fiber optic cable to Eugene was their only linkage to the outside world. Electricity was stored by the Rural Electric Cooperative by bringing in a very large generator, putting it at the substation, and powering what remains of the community from a diesel generator. My understanding is that happened about day 3 after the fire. As of today, we're 4.5 months into this deployment, and CenturyLink, which is the primary telecom company, has not yet restored their fiber optic cable. They've been using contractors to do it. They appear to be working fairly quickly now, but for 2 months into this, there was no evidence of work being done, and appeared like CenturyLink was trying to decide whether they're even going to restore telecom service to this community. This is the central office that, in Blue River. It was a wood construction building, and what you're seeing left over is the metal inside works of the telephone central office. The wood structure around it was completely burned when it caught on fire from the trees burning. And this is a typical pole that carried the utility power, as well as both the Charter cable fiber and the CenturyLink fiber and telecom wires. In this case, the pole survived, but there are something like 100 poles that were burnt off. Of course, poles are made from trees. The trees burnt, the poles burned too. The town was completely cut off and had no 911 access. And another important fact is that the mountaintop where the key cell site is that served this area also had the trees burn, and the buildings at that tower site on the hill, which housed both AT&T, Verizon, and a number of municipal, state, and federal radio systems, all were burned because the building at the tower site was also of wood construction. So not only did they lose their wired telecommunications, they lost also both cellular networks that served the area. We felt, a group of us engineers that are involved in the internet, we know each other informally, formally, from years of working together. The internet works on the basis of internet engineers at various companies collaborating together. It's a multiple, the internet is made up of multiple companies owning portions of the network. And through that cooperation, the internet works collectively as one system. So we saw this rather, if I may say, dismal response by the telecom company. And we felt like that something more could be done for these folks, because not only was it a wildfire, but it was a wildfire that took out their communications in the middle of a pandemic. And the internet was really the big fixer for COVID. I mean, through the internet, we're still able to have things like this meeting, right? I mean, we're all Zoom experts now. This community lost its primary fixer for COVID in the middle of a wildfire, and we couldn't get the commercial providers to commit to a timeline. Now, to be fair, this area is 700, 800 people. It's not downtown Seattle, clearly. But at the same time, somebody has to look after these people, because what other alternative do they have in the middle of a pandemic if they don't have 911, if they don't have the ability to participate in their work, in their job, or go to school via Zoom? So we come up with a design where we thought that we could build a wireless network, and we spent several hours working together on Zoom as engineers, figuring out the topography and what we could do with high-speed wireless internet technology. And we identified 3 different ways to get out of the valley. The valley is about 1,000 feet deep or tall, if you will. So your first job is to distribute to the locations that are important to the community, the school, other things like community centers that are used as relief centers. And then we had to figure out how to get back to somewhere where the internet still worked. The Mount Hagen site, which is one of the dots on the left, was the site that was damaged by the fire. And we were getting reports back from our connections to the county that there was a bit of a squabble going on at the site about restoring service. The state wanted in to restore some service. The county needed in there to restore the sheriff's radio system. The cell companies wanted to get in there. And there was like a single little road that went to the top of a mountain. So we decided to avoid that because we were like, well, we're not going to have any standing up there and we're just going to add to the confusion. So we chose one of our other options, which was to go out the east side of Mackenzie Bridge, use some towers that were owned by a utility. In this case, it was EWEB, which is the Eugene Water and Electric Board. They have a generating station and towers related to that. It's really not unlike what Seattle City Light has up north of Seattle, where they have generating stations as well. Anyway, we made connections with EWEB, got use of their towers. We sort of reverse engineered existing links that were out there, and we determined that we could get connection at the Hoodoo ski area. And then we deployed a microwave backbone to get about 100 megs of internet out of this town and restore the first connectivity. This was Blue Sky Market, one of the first places we deployed. It's a crazy thing, but power and a place to actually operate from is pretty important. And this pole, which just happened to be there and had an electrical service on it, it's used by the Oregon Department of Transportation for traffic counting, just happened to be there. So we latched on to using that and got permission. And right behind it is that very large mountain or hill, which is Castle Rock. It's about 3,900 feet. And that was one of our first places that we connected to, and using Castle Rock with a solar powered Wi-Fi repeater. We had a team up on Castle Rock to test out a kind of proof of concept. One of the people in the community is in the volunteer fire department, so he teamed up with us. It was great having local knowledge. So that's Eric and Brent up on Castle Rock. We're testing some radio signals to prove out that we could actually make a connection. It's my truck, and actually Scott Honecker from Snohomish County. We were down below testing things, and certainly you can see the cell truck in the background with the satellite dish. At this point, the town did have cellular-based service via these portable trucks. They're called COWs, or Cells on Wheels. They use a satellite connection, and one of the big problems with this is that the latency is nearly 1 second. So that when you're doing things like this video conference, it has a really horrific delay that makes it really hard for people to interact. So as a first response, it's great to have these cells on wheels, but you need one for every cell phone company, and they only cover about a mile or two from the truck because they don't have as much power as a full cell site. So a lot of limitations. In any case, there were some cell coverage. It was spotty, high latency, but it wasn't sufficient to do things like a Zoom call. You could make phone calls, you could exchange emails, web surfing was horribly slow, so on. FEMA had set up across the road. They had put in a satellite truck, which their terminology for that is called MERS. They had set up a tent and a generator and quite a production, but this was all aimed at getting people to register. Now they were providing public Wi-Fi, or so it appeared. And one of the challenges was the gas station, which was the only gas station in town, didn't have internet and couldn't process credit card transactions. The store had an ATM machine, the typical white label one. It didn't work. So the initial deployment that we thought we were going to do was help all the small businesses get their technology going again. But it turned into this understanding that there was no timeline for the commercial telecom providers to restore. And we sort of escalated the mission and became sort of the ISP to the town. And still, as of this week, it's still connected, and we're looking at the deployment continuing till the end of February. Charter Cable has now restored, as of 2 weeks ago, about 80% of their infrastructure. CenturyLink expects to have their first fiber optic restoration at the 15th of February, and at that point, it will be just past the 5-month mark. The ATM machine we got going, he was pretty happy when we got that going. We hooked it up using a Wi-Fi technology just across the street to the FEMA truck. It was apparently providing public Wi-Fi, and we thought, okay, well, that'll get that working. We were, relatively good at coordinating what we were doing. We were speaking with the emergency manager for the county. I happen to know Laura, so I dropped her an email. And pretty quickly back, we got an email that said, no, thou shalt not use the FEMA Wi-Fi for restoring commercial things in the town. So yeah, so I have some opinions on FEMA. I won't share those tonight, but I think that FEMA is a great organization where you have a hurricane every year and they have a defined process, but yeah. So we went out and deployed some more infrastructure. These are the towers that we got permission to use from eWeb. They're very high quality commercial telecom towers. We had no contention for access because we chose a route to go to Bend, Oregon that was not being used by any of the providers. They were completely and largely oblivious to this infrastructure we found kind of going out the back way. And as a result, we weren't conflicted with anybody on the mountaintops that the commercial guys were using. We did some more testing after our initial deployment. Things were working pretty good. A team went up to Castle Rock on that mountain and deployed a solar system. And these people work in networks, ISPs, and telecom companies for profession. This is a volunteer work on a weekend. We built this, collaborating over Zoom. The team, when they finished up the initial deployment, and then later we deployed a solar system to keep it active. And that solar system is still running today. Our rough calculations back in October turned out to be pretty good, and it worked right through the December low period of solar energy. And we've never had an outage since October on this system. We kind of ad hoc designed in about 4 hours. The first connection that we served was the ranger station. So the ranger station was the fire command for the fire in this area, and they had no telecommunications from the night of the fire until mid-October. We were the first organization restoring service to them, and we provided a 50 megabit internet connection. Once we got that connected, the ranger station actually had never been connected that fast ever. Their normal connection was 3 megabits per second over what's called a T1 circuit, 2 T1s from CenturyLink. They're at the end of the road, 3 or 4 miles down the road from the last fiber optic connection. And even though they have a great office with video conference, they've never ever been able to use the video conference system that the Department of Agriculture installed because they didn't ever have enough bandwidth. So they were remarking that they want to keep our connection permanently because it's actually better than what they normally have.
Randy, about 10-minute warning.
Okay. And we put the antenna in a tree because 100-foot Douglas fir trees actually make pretty good towers when you don't have a tower. Especially great because we had forest engineers who love climbing trees. This was the other box we installed in Rainbow. This is the typical deployment that we settled on, a link up to the mountain and the Wi-Fi box that provides Wi-Fi service. And you might ask, well, why did it need to be there? There are these cell trucks. Well, the cell trucks restored their service. The cell companies rather restored their service, and they pulled the trucks out in late November, early December. That restored the cell coverage back to about 1 bar in this town, which is barely enough to make a phone call reliably. And for the last period of time through December and January, our Wi-Fi boxes have really been the only reliable connectivity in the town. That wasn't our intention. We thought that this was an interim thing that we would be doing for about 6 weeks or 8 weeks until the telecom carriers could rebuild the fiber. But unfortunately, even with the full pressure of the Oregon Public Utilities Commission, they seem unable to actually get the providers to move faster. And it was quite an eye-opening experience because I think it's our expectation that telecom companies that have fiber optic cables would want to restore service quickly. And it, I guess it's an example in this particular case that we can't always depend on the commercial providers to have a willing, motivated team that wants to spend money to restore service, particularly where there's perhaps only 700 customers. Maybe that would be different if it were in Seattle because there's a high density, I don't know, but it was a shock. And what we ended up providing was this map with all the locations that we supported public Wi-Fi on. We're now thankfully in the mode where we're bringing this back and reducing the amount of service that we're having. Charter has restored service. About half of these have now been transitioned. The community still needs the Wi-Fi access because service along the main highway has been restored, but not all the side streets. So we found an opportunity to partner. And in one case, we partnered with the Christian church. We rewired the church, put in some more Wi-Fi access points, and turned operation back to the church. We did the same thing with the community centers. And hopefully, by the end of February, we'll be able to turn down the network completely. I guess the thing that I've learned from this is internet is a critical item that if people in the community have internet, they can self-respond and fix issues themselves. And restoring Wi-Fi is as good as restoring cell service because new smartphones have a capability called Wi-Fi calling. So if you provide a person Wi-Fi internet and a little bit of instruction, even if the cell networks are down, they can still typically get their cell phones working again. They can reach out to family. And I really strongly believe that communications leads to self-help, and that self-help might be some of the best help we can get people after an emergency because they can communicate with people they know. They can leverage resources in their network of friends and family, and we can help get them, a little bit more normal in their life. So with that, happy to take any questions, and thanks for the opportunity.
Randy, thank you so much. You hit all the key things, which was FEMA's not going to act the way we expect, and the slowness of restoration in even a small community. I mean, you can't tell if that's the reason or not, but it's just like cautionary tale. So questions for Randy.
This is Johnny from High Point Hub. Just really curious, are you using Wi-Fi as the backhaul for your backbone?
Yes, we're using the unlicensed Wi-Fi frequencies. There is a type of internet provider called a WISP, or a wireless internet service provider, that you might find
familiar.
in rural areas. And we use similar technology and similar equipment that's readily available.
Who is the actual bandwidth provider that it was coming from? I missed that at the beginning.
We had support from a company in Bend, Oregon called Bend Broadband, which is the cable company. And through our friends that are involved in internet, we were kind of connected directly to people that worked at the company, because basically all the internet engineers kind of know each other. So we reached out to a friend who's the lead engineer over there and said, hey, would your company be willing to support the bandwidth? And it turns out that, the lead engineer at Bend Broadband also sits on the Oregon Broadband Task Force and is well connected, and they just saw it as a community thing to do. So they gave us up to 400 megabits per second at the Hoodoo ski area where they already had a link, and we only had to build to that location.
And I saw you were using a Yagi there for point to point. What was the latency you got out of that?
Okay, you guys are going down the technical rabbit hole.
That's my last question.
Okay, that'll be your last question.
Well, I'll take it back to the community is, the valley is heavily forested. And of course, a lot of the wireless frequencies we would use are in the microwave bands, which are attenuated by trees. So the Yagi was a lower frequency, 900 megs. We were attempting to use the lower frequencies of Wi-Fi to penetrate the tree cover, which was a serious problem.
Other questions?
So I just wanted to know about, I know there were volunteers, but you did seem to have a fair amount of equipment. Did you get a FEMA grant, or how did you fund?
No, FEMA couldn't possibly move that quick. FEMA is a bank, right? So think of it as a bank that pays really slow, and then you'll have a pretty good idea of what FEMA does. It turns out that a lot of the people, the engineers that we were connected with, work for smaller companies, and one of the companies was a managed service provider in Portland called Elevate Technology Group. They do wireless professionally, and they basically opened up their warehouse to let us use what they had on a loan basis. We had to put things on those 200-foot towers. We had a company called Northwest Towers donate 2 days of rigger time. Riggers are the people that climb towers. So we had an outpouring of small ISP help, small technology companies that saw this as a worthwhile thing and donated resources to make it happen. I think it was all done on the basis that people felt sorry for this community that had lost, in some cases, everything in the Blue River area where the whole town burnt. But then the people that were upriver were completely disconnected. We recognized that the wireless carriers were not going to stay there with their little satellite trucks to wait for CenturyLink and Charter. It was, you know, the 3 cell companies were there for a while, but they wanted to get back out of town because those cell trucks are expensive to operate in a short-term resource. Nobody anticipates being there for 5 months. So,
And remember this, there was also multiple fires going on across Oregon, California, and Washington at the same time. So
how this relates, I think, back to Seattle is, you know, if we set up a hub or we set up a distribution point, we're on the cusp of having things like Starlink satellite internet available, and the future might be having kits with Starlink internet that we could set up at a hub or a community distribution point, provide Wi-Fi to get people with their smartphones, you know, on the internet again, so they can let friends know they're okay, and to possibly offer charging for cell phones, because people, of course, only have a day before their cell phone dies, depending on the battery status. Now, this is probably not as high a priority as offering food and water and medical treatment, but I think that the ability to provide communications does lead people towards self-help and better outcomes.
And Randy, ACS formed a subcommittee to start working on that. Is that correct?
We have. We've started a digital tech team, which is to leverage many of the people that are engineers that work in technology and are also on ACS. And we're looking at what kind of kits we might put together to have Wi-Fi gear on hand and to be able to do things like, you know, activate a community center and turn up Wi-Fi to support, you know, operations in a neighborhood or that type of thing. Like who knows what we'll actually be called to do. It might be that we need to take the bays of a fire station and turn it into some kind of a receiving area with desks or something, and they need Wi-Fi for that. But certainly, I think traditionally we've looked at radio and passing messages as a way to help the community. Another way to look at that is if we can provide Wi-Fi infrastructure, then the community can pass its own messages. And it's a lot more throughput than channeling it through hams passing messages.
And that's our good connection with ACS, is because if you get something up and going, we can test it for you. So,
well,
right.
Yeah, you probably have a lot of technical members in the hub group, and you know, honestly, to be helpful with Wi-Fi, you don't have to have a ham radio license. So there are lots of opportunities with this direction.
All right, if there's no other questions, I'm going to pause for 1 second. Thank you, Randy. That was perfect. That was just super. Thank you very much for coming in tonight and giving that. So I am going to, I think, unpin Randy. Yeah, okay, good. And I'm going to flip the agenda because I think Matt's on. Matt, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. We have several Matts, so I was kind of like, which one is this?
Always a lot of Matts. I think I had 4 Matt friends growing up. Sometimes there were 5 Matts in one place.
So I am starting to share my screen.
And actually, I have it right here. It might be easier if I just share it.
Okay, sweet.
Because I do have it up. So give me a second.
So Matt's going to talk to us about, I've been kind of checking in with him to see when classes are going to get listed up, and they've just finally finalized their 2021 outreach plans, which are going to be different. They have a different focus than in the past year slightly. So I wanted him to step in and give us a briefing. This is the sort of stuff because a lot of it will be virtual. We will be able to use this to get out to our communities for something for them to engage with preparedness on, even in COVID.
All right, so yeah, thanks for having me. For those of you I don't know, my name is Matt Offlick. I'm the Community Relations Manager with the Office of Emergency Management. But like Cindy said, I think we have a slightly different focus this year. I mean, we'll do a lot of our normal programming, but I just want to talk about some of the things that are going to be a focus, and then just there'll be time for any questions. So just kind of high level, what we're looking at. The one thing is just an increased focus on explaining city response. And part of this is kind of a take off some of the deep dive sessions that you guys have done, and you've had some city departments in kind of talking about city response and what that looks like.
Can I check? Can you guys see Matt's screen?
Yes.
Yeah, see it,
Loud and
Cindy?
clear.
Thank
Yes.
you, because I screwed up with the pinning him. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
All right.
Sorry, Matt.
All right, so yeah, an increased focus on explaining city response. So, I think our traditional message is government's going to be overwhelmed. You need to be self-sufficient, but I think there's a lot more to that story, which could help motivate people and kind of give them context to why they should be prepared, why they should be doing things. And it adds kind of an element of storytelling that isn't just us telling you to do something, but kind of telling you what we're doing as well. And then an increased focus on getting community input in the planning process. I know some of you attend our disaster management committee meetings. We had a good conversation over the summer, but us and all levels of government and emergency management use terms like whole community planning, but I think not a lot of people know how to do that. It's very hard to engage the whole community. So we're just looking at more ways that we can work with community to validate planning assumptions that we have in plans while we're updating them, and just incorporate kind of community knowledge and needs into the plans that we have. Increasing Alert Seattle signups has always been a priority, but it's on the mayor's radar, and the mayor's office really wants to see those increase. So we're going to focus a lot on that. And then earthquake early warning. So I'll give some more details on this, but it sounds like we should have some live earthquake early warning in place in Washington in the spring. So I think there's going to be a significant amount of work around that outreach. So just a little bit about city response. I get the question all the time from people in the public, or when I'm at dinner with friends or something, or when I used to be able to have dinner with friends. So what's the city's plan for an earthquake? And it's not that easy to explain, but there are some things that I think we can come up with some better ways of explaining to the public that aren't just referring to them to a 100, 200 page plan on a website. So really explaining how we prioritize, what isolation looks like in a catastrophic earthquake, and how as a city we prioritize, and then how departments are prioritizing response to restoration. How we're coordinating across government and with other levels of government. And then the outside assistance. Randy, I appreciated your presentation, and the idea of how quickly or not quickly FEMA moves and other assistance, I think is good for people to know, but it's also good to know that we do have an idea of what we need and the things that we have in place to quickly ask for what we need. Emergency communication is a big piece, kind of explaining how we will do that and the various mechanisms that we do that with. And then as part of this, it's always kind of touching on what the implications are for the public. So, fire department is doing this, and this is how they're prioritizing. Therefore, for you, this is what you could be doing to be able to take care of yourself and take care of neighbors and all that. So that's kind of the city response piece. Right now, we're finalizing kind of content for a broad kind of look at city response, kind of a high level view of how we prioritize, how we coordinate, what impacts we can expect and how we'll deal with them. And looking to have some public webinars on that in April, and then have some department specific things each month after that that are much more focused with department representatives from these various departments, kind of giving more of a deep dive into what response looks like for them, what they have in place in terms of external agreements, resources, things like that. This is just a draft schedule, but I think we pretty much have buy-in from all these folks to have some kind of input on this. So it'll just be a matter of the order that we go. And then community engagement in city plans. This is a big one. Like I said, we had a June DMC meeting that we had really good conversation. And some things that came out of that seemed like consensus was that we just need to engage community early on in the process. We have a tendency, if we are going to get input, it's sending out a plan for review so you can review it. And then really honing in on stakeholders at the beginning of plan development and figuring out who are groups most likely to be affected or who would have an active role in the response and engaging them in a plan update. The other development here is we've developed a planning policy that kind of covers all OEM plans or plans that are facilitated by OEM or fall within our comprehensive emergency management plan, kind of suite of plans. And so we're kind of formalizing some of this in terms of a stakeholder identification as being a first step in plan updates, having equitable engagement in terms of educating people about the plans, engaging people in the planning process. So that got actually approved today by DMC, our planning policy. So, you know, that's really a way for us to write it down and then stick to it and make it be a process and support other departments in doing this as well. So just a quick example, we recently did our hazard mitigation plan update, or we're in the process of doing it. And there's some things we did in that I think are a good best practice. Some of the things are not necessarily what we want to do and are related to the fact that we were dealing with COVID impacts all through 2020 and then suddenly had to update a plan. So things we probably would have done differently, but things that were new were just having an actual web page for the plan update that kind of explains what the plan is, what the timeline is for updating, the key documents about the plan. A big thing is this was a plan update summary, but we just realized we need more products to really get those 100-page plans down into something that is digestible to the average person out there, that doesn't require them to read 100, 200 pages, and just give a more graphical representation and a quick look at, hey, what is this thing? For mitigation, I think a lot of people out there, when they hear mitigation, they have no idea what that means. They have some very focused idea of what that means. So for the mitigation plan, we made some just project examples to show types of things that have been funded with city money or with FEMA mitigation funds in the past, so people get an idea of what this work looks like. We also did a community survey, so we put this out in our newsletter and on social media. One of the focuses for mitigation, similar to kind of our getting community input on planning, is to have more community-based mitigation projects. So if you look at a typical hazard mitigation plan that we've put out in the past, you're going to see a lot of emphasis on mitigation projects that are focused on city-owned infrastructure and city-owned property, which makes sense because that's really what we're supposed to be documenting. But when we talk about getting FEMA hazard mitigation funding, we do have an opportunity to help other people in the community get that funding, and we really want to shift to trying to do more of that. So last year we were able to work with Roots Housing, and they got a $5 million grant to seismically retrofit a 49-unit low-income housing building in downtown Seattle. So we've done those things once in a while, but we really want to pivot to try to do more of those things. So part of our community survey was asking people, you know, this array of like community services that nonprofits and others are providing out there in the community, kind of which of those should we be prioritizing if we're looking to identify more mitigation projects. So, you know, looking at like food banks, low-income housing, emergency homeless shelters or homeless services, things like that. So this was a way to get some community input on when we pivot in that direction, what might we be looking at doing. And then I had focus groups down there too. We did some really good focus groups with our community safety ambassadors with those same questions and got some detailed feedback on for their communities, kind of what are the organizations that they value most, what are the kind of services that they think are most important, places that could benefit from potential mitigation. So for 2021, some specific things we're looking at is, it is on our schedule to update our evacuation annex to our comprehensive emergency management plan and our damage assessment plan. We actually might push the updates of those in terms of when we need to have a plan finalized to 2022, because I think we've realized we have a lot going on with COVID and some other things. But we want to use 2021 to start that kind of community conversation. And I think a big part is, you know, if you look at our plans, we sometimes have 15, 20, 30 planning assumptions that have been developed to kind of say, you know, this is what we believe will be the state when this happens, or these are some things that we think we can assume about the environment or about how people will react. But I don't know if we've always done a good job of vetting those thoroughly with community. So especially for evacuation planning, I think that's a really good one for kind of community conversation around, do these things make sense? Are there assumptions we don't have in there? You know, if this scenario happened in your neighborhood at 2 in the morning and the fire department had to evacuate a 1 mile radius, you know, how would you get that information? How would you interpret that information? Things like Damage assessment opens itself up, I think, to a lot of opportunities. Something we've thrown around a lot is just how we get information from the public. I know, we do exercises with ACS and hubs and how we would pass information that way. But how else might we get information from the community about what is going on out there from a damage and impact standpoint? So I think there's a lot of opportunity with that one. Then Alert Seattle promotions. Like I said, this has always been big, but the mayor is really big on it now. I think it's one of the first things that she was talking to Curry about, and the deputy mayor was talking to Curry about how we increase those opt-ins. One thing that we've talked about, and Curry's already briefed the emergency executive board on this, and we put down some ideas, is really expanding department use. So we've done a lot of marketing efforts in the past. We've done a lot of things to promote Alert Seattle. The ability to increase opt-ins, it's pretty difficult. We saw a huge spike in the first couple of months in 2015 when we launched. When we do some marketing, we see some spikes, but when you kind of do the math on the amount of money we put into it and what you get, it's hard to justify it. The thing that we see increase opt-ins more than anything is when the system's used, especially if there's a significant event and an alert gets sent out. It seems like it's word of mouth, because we've had things. There was some alerts sent out by SDOT and SPD in that Pike Pine shooting last year. And I think we saw 1,000 people sign up within 2 days after that, which is much higher than normal. So just using the system helps. We saw increases when we started using it for weekly COVID updates. We've seen a lot of people sign up. So there's always a fear that we will use it too much, but all the evidence thus far points to we are definitely not oversaturating, and when we send messages, we get more people to sign up. So, we can reevaluate if people start using a lot and we see numbers decrease, but right now it seems like it makes sense to send more. People want more information, that's why they sign. And then just working with other departments, some of this has fallen on OEM since we launched, kind of promoting, and other departments do help, but we're really going to tap into other departmental resources in the city. The utilities that are sending out billing and things like that. People have good communication channels, and just tapping into as much of the city infrastructure as we can to push out information. We did some really good, and I'll share a dashboard here in a minute, maybe. We started doing some really good kind of people on the ground outreach this fall. We kind of stopped that as some restrictions were kind of dialed back in terms of COVID, because we just didn't want to be telling people to go out there. But I think we're going to start that back up. So having our public education volunteers just out there in neighborhoods, especially places with high concentrations of businesses and community-based organizations, and getting posters and windows and business cards on counters, just so it's more visible. During COVID, we launched the opt-in feature. So, I think we've had some difficulty because people go to a website and they have to fill out a long form, and they don't want to do that. But there's a little more ease of access with the option of being able to just text Seattle to 67283, and then you're signed up. I think that helps when you have visual materials out in the public, when it's as simple as, oh, I just need to do that thing right now. So that was really cool. We had about 15 high school students too that we brought in, and we trained them on Alert Seattle and kind of talking points, and they were out in neighborhoods putting up posters, getting out business cards. I forgot how uncomfortable high school people can be talking to adults. I realized that while we trained them. So it was great then to see that they did go out there and they did the work, and they would record on the map where they went and post pictures of them putting up posters and things like that. So we're going to try to do more of that as well. And I think once we kind of reach a place where our volunteers have gotten where they're going to go, and we've tapped out the high school students, maybe, then I think we'd want to reach out to you all too, to kind of see, hey, can people help fill in the gaps and we get materials out.
Get us all vaccines, we'll be good.
Yeah.
So
And
you're
then,
almost done, Matt?
yeah. And
Okay.
then just continue to analyze marketing efforts. So we do social media ads, things like that. We're just continuing to look at what works the best, what does not work. And then the last thing is earthquake early warning. So Cindy, I sent you a link if you want to share it with everyone. Basically, the state is doing a wireless emergency alert test on February 25th. They put out their first press release today with detailed instructions on how people enable their phone to receive a test message, because you don't automatically receive a WIA test message. But this is going to be the first test of the earthquake early warning system with the plan that they would use wireless emergency alerts to push out earthquake early warning alerts. And they're expecting earthquake early warning to roll out in May is the tentative date. So there'll be the test in February, which there's going to be a big push for that because we want people to participate. We want people to be talking about, learning about earthquake early warning. And then leading up to and at the launch in May, we're just going to need to do a lot of education about what does it mean when you get an alert? How much time might you have? You know, what are the benefits of it? What are the limitations of it? That's all I got. That's kind of our focus for 2021. And in addition, we're still doing virtual programming on kind of SNAP, general preparedness, normal things that we do, and we're going to start pushing that more and more now to get people to be requesting those.
Okay, questions for Matt? I posted the links he sent me in the chat, even though I forgot to say they were from Matt. Matt, when you mentioned the engagement of community on evacuations, and I forgot what the other one was, but evacuations caught my mind. We do a deep dive once a month, and I'm always open to topics. And so if you want to have a deep dive on evacuations and make it more of a focus group input session, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Let's put that down. I'll have to figure out timeline and when it is, but that's exactly the kind of stuff we want to do.
Okay.
So if you can still see my screen, this is just, oh, it says on pause, but I just brought up the Alert Seattle dashboard. So we used Survey 123 when we tracked kind of our Alert Seattle outreach, which was really useful, just having people be able to go out, say where they put posters and cards, so we weren't kind of doubling back.
We're not seeing your screen, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead and share it. We got a minute.
Oh, it says it's
You're
paused. but
you're
I don't
still
know how to-
sharing, but your PowerPoint and the PowerPoint slide is up.
I'm not as Carl knows, I'm not the best Zoomer, so.
I'm reading, click to exit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all I see is stop share.
There you go.
Seems like I have to stop to start again.
Right.
Well, I'll just show you quick there. So yeah, basically we were just able to show kind of can you see that now?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
so kind of map where everyone is. We can zoom in on, click on those, have a total count. Over here tracking like which groups, so it was our high school volunteers, our staff, our pub ed volunteers, kind of looking at who did what, where they did it. So that was beneficial.
Matt built something the same thing when we were distributing the how to help your neighbors during COVID. Right.
Yeah.
During COVID, in the early days before we all really went bunker heavy. All right. Any other questions from Matt?
I have a
We'll move
request,
on.
Cindy.
Go ahead.
So Matt, I love the idea, like with your example with the hazard mitigation of making that simpler and easier to read and whatnot. I was wondering if in the future that time that the community is given to respond could also be considered, especially near the beginning. I know at this last one, they posted on the 26th of January that you guys wanted feedback on it, but it was an 85-page document that I would have had to have read in 3 days, which isn't reasonable. Especially, I mean, you guys took probably.
Yeah, no, I understand. To be fair, I think it was the 20th that
I
so
saw
it
on-
was 9 days, but I think we had challenges on timing with the mitigation plan because we have deadlines of when we need to get into FEMA and we had other. I think in the future, we want to find better ways, period, to get feedback on a plan, because I think we know that just posting a plan and having an open-ended kind of what do you think about this plan is not the best way to get input. So we may do that to give people the opportunity if they want to do it that way. But I think it's more these focus groups and conversations we can have that are focused on kind of the core parts of those documents that really impact people.
Well, and
Yeah,
if you
point taken.
if you want to be involved in a focus group, how do you get involved in that? Is there a way for us to get involved? Do we just reach out to you and say, we'd really like to be a part
Well,
of
like
it?
Cindy said, I mean, I think you guys would always be one of the groups that we would want to tap into because you kind of have a standing agenda and we can come to you.
Right, Matt, and I'll make an open invitation. You've got the Hub Captain's email. So if you want to call us to a focus meeting, You don't have to go through me. You can send it directly
Yeah.
to all the hub captains. That would be fine.
Yeah, and that'll be the plan. And we're still, I mean, these are the things that are kind of still in the works, and we probably see doing this stuff more towards spring and beyond after we kind of figure out process and timeline. But the other things, like we use our community safety ambassadors a lot for these focus conversations. We have some contracts with community-based organizations to do outreach who can help us kind of bring community in to a space and have those conversations. So would definitely welcome other ideas on how to kind of bring people to the table to talk about these things.
All right, I'm going to move us along. We're running slightly over with a lot of stuff still left to go. So Carl, thank you, Matt, for
All right,
tuning
yeah,
in.
and I got to head out, so thank you.
Yep. Carl? Oh, got to come off mute, Carl.
Okay, I can't just hold my space bar down. Hang on. Okay, my audio there now?
Yes.
Good, I'm sorry. Following up on Randy's presentation, they were trying to find, they have this community of 800 to 1,000 people where there was no 911, no way to get emergency response. And they were talking about trying to find a way to give them some means of calling for help. And the discussion crossed the topic of FRS, GMRS radios, which were not practical. They reached out to me. I run a nonprofit company called Charity Communications Foundation. Turned out my solution wasn't the one they needed either, but we did talk to Oregon Emergency Management about it. And as a result of that conversation, I suggested to Cindy, maybe it would be valuable for hubcaps to be aware that I exist. My charity comps exists of what we do and what we can do for you. I was our original co-founder of the Broadview Hubs with Dale. I've been involved with hubs ever since that point, about 10 years ago. I'm deputy director of Seattle ACS. I'm one of Matt's outreach presenters, along with Ann and Cheryl and a variety of other volunteers. So I do a lot of volunteer work. And way back when I was, and still do, a lot of communications volunteer work. And as ham volunteers seem to dry up and go away for a lot of events, another person and I co-founded this company for the purpose of being able to provide radios for supportive events like Special Olympics Washington is a real good example. So we incorporated in May of 2010, got nonprofit designation from the IRS and received an FCC business commercial radio license in August of 2010. We exist to provide short-term loan of radio communications equipment. If you need radios for something, for an exercise, for a hub drill, for a community event, for almost anything, give me a shout, because I might be able to help you. And I'm going to go through briefly what I can do and can't do in support of you. I just got a request this evening from Kittitas County for radios to support their virus antidote inoculation sites. So who's eligible to borrow? Pretty much anybody, civic, community, educational, or nonprofit. We're a nonprofit. We exist to support that principle and purpose. We cannot support a for-profit endeavor, but otherwise we can probably help you out. What I have to offer you, 3 portable UHF repeaters, multiple all-star nodes, which I'll talk about briefly in a minute, approximately 300 handheld radios, and 6 mobile or base station radios, which also get, those 6 radios can go any of a multiple set of directions. So I can't recreate them multiple times over, but 6 of them can go out somehow. What an all-star node is radio over internet. I can put a device in, for example, Fauntleroy, and another device in the Lake Washington shoreline of Northeast Seattle, where you have no possible way of talking to each other directly. And as long as there's internet, you could talk to each other like you were standing side by side. So as long as internet's available, all-star nodes can be a very powerful utensil. They can be used on amateur frequencies, they can be used on commercial frequencies, and they can be used on GMRS frequencies. So if this sounds like something that would support something you're trying to do, give me a shout. We can probably support it. portable repeaters. I've got 3. They're low power, moderate range. You set them up. I set one up in my backyard. I can go anywhere from a half a mile to 2 miles and reliably work it with very inexpensive handheld radios. So it can greatly extend your local footprint. If you want a repeater for, again, for an exercise, a drill, or even in a real situation, I may be able to help you. Right now, the repeaters are all set up on my commercial frequencies. It is possible to retune them to amateur use. It takes a fair amount of work, and the radios are not type accepted for GMRS use, so they will not be GMRS repeaters. Radios, I've got about 70 better quality 5-watt handheld radios and about 240 cheap 2-watt Chinese radios. The cheap radios serve a purpose. I can put a lot of radios into a lot of hands that don't need wide area coverage. And that really has made a difference for people like Special Olympics, where they're just trying to cover a sporting events venue or something like that. So they don't need miles of range. They need, you know, tens or hundreds of yards of range. With a base radio and a good antenna, you can reach these radios over a fairly wide range. So if you set up a base at your hub and had a decent antenna at your hub and everybody else was running around with cheap radios, you get a couple of miles coverage easily just simplex, or you could put a repeater there and give everybody communications with each other. So what can I do for you? I can give you radios. I can loan you radios for all kinds of different events or situations. And if you think this is something that would be beneficial to you, don't hesitate to give me a call. In non-emergent situations where we can plan ahead, I'm sure I can support all kinds of different things. If all hell breaks loose and we have a really big disaster, I have no idea how much resource is going to be available where or when. If I can supplement someplace, wonderful. And if I can't, that's life. Get a hold of me, carl.leon@wingrider.net. And there's my phone number. And the website charitycoms.com has a link to email also. So that in a nutshell, and I went really fast, skipping some of the detail I was going to cover just because you're running a little late, but it got the key pieces of information out. Questions?
Carl, I have one. So if we were planning a youth event and we were showing people the importance of radios or just trying to engage them with some hands-on stuff, because you have the commercial license, we can hand all those kids a radio and send them out to go do something in their neighborhood and report back, right?
The beauty of the commercial license is you don't need an individual license. You don't need a ham license. You don't need a GMRS license. My company's license covers your use of my radios. And anybody that you hand the radio to is legal using it. I was going to say something else, but I thought
for people who might be thinking of something to engage, you know, different folks in their community and stuff, and a youth exercise with radios is like a sure win.
And the cheap radios are affordable if one of them doesn't come back.
Other questions for Carl?
This is Gabrielle. So I had a question. Carl, could you just go back to your email, or could you give it to me again so I make sure I get it in the minutes and it's correct?
I will put it in chat.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
And if anybody has radio type questions at all, I'm more than happy to make sure I'm typing that right. I'm more than happy to talk to you. Like I say, I'm Deputy Director of ACS. In addition to what I've covered here, OEM has 3 UHF repeaters and a cache of 50 radios, handheld radios. I know how to get to those. I would need OEM's permission to make use of them, but there is resource out there in addition to my company that might be a resource for a situation that you need radios for. So don't hesitate to holler, call me, email me, and ask questions, discuss options for use of equipment, whatever. Thank you, Cindy, for the opportunity to talk to everybody.
Thank you, Carl.
I think
All right.
David has a question.
Just a comment, we have a small cache of portable radios with a lot of those frequencies at North Seattle College. In the event of an activation, we'll all be in touch with each other.
Thank you. And thanks for people watching for other people. I can't see everybody. Carl?
And Cindy, one more comment. The type of microwave relay equipment that Randy was talking about and utilized in Oregon, ACS has some limited sets of that on hand right now. I mean, I've got the ability to set up a ham-WAN connection and then relay it through 2 or 3 relays to get it to where it might be needed. So if we are setting up a shelter someplace or something else, you know, I can't do it all over the city, but I could certainly provide support to a point someplace, even if you don't have direct access, to demonstrate how we can provide internet through that type of a system. So again, that's not Charity Comms, that's ACS. But again, don't hesitate to holler if you want to dive into any of that kind of stuff.
Okay, I'm going to use that as a launch pad to go into kind of like some reports here. And we'll try and make it really fast so we have enough time for around the room. I attended a meeting today or yesterday that said one of the things that they're trying to get out from under COVID, but they're going to resume work on the sheltering plan. We had a deep dive on that, which means they also plan on exercising the shelters in Cascadia Rising, which means they probably might do some little mini practices ahead of that. So that would be really fun to see if we could set up a radio station at one of these human service departments, soft side shelter places. So we'll see if those come out. I'm first on the agenda for reporting on a couple other things. So Good Samaritan law, man, I tell you, when you put legislation out, it's like whiplash. So it's good news, bad news, good news, bad news. Good news, we had a sponsor and we have the bill that went into the House to extend Good Samaritan law coverage to non-medical situations. And I hear some of you have sent comments in. I didn't see many of them because we don't see it. And then only 3 people were at the public testimony to comment in favor of it. No one was against it. So it looked good. There was a proposed change that might have added one more additional word into the bill to make it really, response was not in the bill. So response and rescue. And I guess in the process of opening it up to put that in, there was a policy decision that was made late tonight. I got the call at I got the email at 4:58, which they send it out right at the end of the business day. So you don't have time to respond, but I did. So I called and the message said, we don't think this is going to pass out of committee because that was the bad news. Good news, the current provisions under Good Samaritan seem to cover. That's what their policy person has said. And their policy person is a legal person. So I've launched an email to him and gave him the background of how the Assistant Attorney General had told the hubs back in 2013 that we're not covered, and we keep ping pong balling what the answer is. So I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow morning in the executive session, whether the bill is going to die. And if it dies, we will go and find the Attorney General and bring him to a hub captain meeting and say, please put this in writing, how the goods, give us an interpretation so that we can provide this to all the volunteers that you guys say that the Good Samaritan Act really does cover for everything, even though the words say non-medical. So bad news in the bill may die, good news in that we may have a venue to get this solved without having to go through a stupid bill and, advocate for it at the Senate. So that's where we are on that. And I can't answer any other questions beyond that other than wait and see what happens at 8 tomorrow morning.
Which committee is it, Cindy?
It's in the civil law and justice, I think it is.
Thank you.
Civil rights and judiciary. Next on the agenda is Anne to talk about some of the projects she's got going under our grants. And I don't see you maybe talking.
There
you are.
I'm not sure what I'm sharing.
Well,
You
front
see
and
it?
foremost is Hub and a Grant box.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out do you see a PowerPoint?
There we go. Got it.
Okay, great. So Hub in a Box grant, this was late last year. We got 9 hubs funded through this. This is where the city buys you the box and the gear and just kind of dumps it on you. You don't get a whole lot of choice of what goes in. These are the 9 hubs that are involved in that project. Only 2 of them currently have the boxes in. You can see where they are on the map. And most of the ones that aren't in are because they're in Parks Department, and Parks has just really been backed up. So there's 9 new hubs there. And then we wrote the grant to get 5 new hubs. We're also making a couple videos, very simple videos for the public, explaining what hubs are, and we're getting those translated into the 7 top tier languages in Seattle. We're also looking at the cost of getting a picture-in-picture American Sign Language person, and also audio description, which we're finding out when there's a pause in the video, someone that has low vision or is blind would be able to hear somebody quietly whispering in their ear, telling them what's on the screen. So they set the stage for them because they are not able to see the video. So that's called audio description. We're looking at doing that. And then we also have money in this grant for interpretation for several grand opening kinds of events. So we're getting there. What else? These are the 5 hubs that are involved in this second grant. Kind of spread out. Those are the hub captains. We just had a meeting last night trying to help them build their hubs and reach out to their communities, just like, we all did at one point or are still struggling with. And so we are working on this first video. What is a hub? We need a narrator. So if any of you have David Attenborough, aspirations, we're looking for the voice for these videos. We probably will never see your face. We are really just looking for a voice. We're doing lots of graphics so that it's not just a video of a talking head. So please get a hold of me if you think you might have a voice for radio. We're looking for very simple, not a, no accents, that kind of stuff. The most understandable person out there is what we're looking for. So that's what we're working on right now. Teachable moment, really quick. I have not done a whole lot. I got a little stymied talking to OEM and trying to figure out how to make this a very cohesive message. And for those of you that don't remember this, the teachable moment was the idea that if we had a mild earthquake, like a 3-point or a 4-point something that shook everybody up, and so everybody gets really aware that we live in earthquake country and runs to Costco or Fred Meyer or whatever and start stocking up on stuff, would the hub captains be comfortable, assuming we've all gotten vaccines by then, would you be comfortable sitting outside your hub or outside your local grocery store or wherever your community would go? Would you be comfortable sitting there with a table, catching people on the way out and talking to them about preparedness steps and maybe guiding them in the right direction? So that was the plan, was to have something ready to go so that if we have a teachable moment, we are ready to go. We can hit the ground running and we're not having to develop tools at that point. So as we all know with the COVID pandemic, if we would have had a more cohesive message as a nation, I think we all know we would have done a lot better and this would have been handled better, because that's one of the things that public health knows very, very well, is that you have to have a consistent, cohesive message. So trying to coordinate what we're going to say with what might be coming out on Alert Seattle or other messages that a broader level might put out, the city might put out. So kind of stuck there, more to come. I just kind of got stymied and I've got some ideas and I need to get the group that's working on this, I need to get them back together and get their opinions. So teachable moment. Real quickly, we had a radio exercise, GMRS radio exercise on the north end. It was good practice. We all got to, play with our radios a lot. Found out there's a much smarter way to organize this. And, that's typical for me. I do it wrong the first time and then I realize that there's a smarter way to do it. But it was really good. It was really good practice. I would highly recommend it. I would be happy to talk to anybody else that wants to organize one in their north end. It wasn't organized well enough to really tell where our dead spots are, but we had some people communicate on simplex channels, which there's no repeater involved. It's just radio to radio communications. We had some people actually make contact, which was kind of surprising. So we will continue to get data with the next exercise we have coming up. I just want to remind everybody that we did do the disaster trivia a couple weeks ago. I think it was a lot of fun. I think it's, if you have a little bit of energy and a little bit of bandwidth, I think it would be a great way to get your community involved and have a little fun around disaster preparedness. And there's lots of tailoring we can do. So please reach out. Myself, Erica is very involved in it. Cindy is involved. So one of us or a couple of us can definitely support your efforts of engaging your community. I think it's just a really fun thing to do while we're still all stuck at home. And that's, go ahead, Cindy.
On the disaster trivia, we owe you the front end of the video. We just couldn't get our schedule synced up. We're going to have to make that up in February. So it's coming, but you know, it's pretty intuitive.
So that's all I have.
Any questions for Ann? Okay, the last minute I've got in the COVID committee report. So we've met 3 times, really good working sessions. We get a lot of work done. There is a draft that's been put together and sent to one of our committee members just for a sanity check before it goes out to the rest of the COVID work group. It's about 6 pages long, and it's right now it's kind of like an annex that we would stick into our books, but it covers, we treated it as though we don't know what kind of pandemic might be in the world should there be a disaster at the same time. So we kind of put it in as universal precautions, expecting that you would be aware of what your current pandemic is when it happens. So we put in things around expanded spacing to accommodate what we now know is important social distancing and crowd control and queue control. We've got some new signage suggested, and there's discussion about whether supplies should be put in or not. We have a new role that we added to help manage people for this. And then several of our roles have additional duties related to crowd control and better conveying of information when you can't let people get close enough to read a whiteboard, you know. So that should be coming out in maybe the next month or so. And that's all I had for general kind of like all of us announcements. And now we'll go to around the room. So I still don't have any better way to do this than to say, okay, we're going to let's start in the southeast sector, then southwest, and work our way up across the city. So I'm giving you a heads up. If you are in the southeast sector, unmute now. If you don't have anything, it's okay just to say nothing, and then we'll move over to the southwest. So whoever is in the southeast sector, you guys have anything today? I saw Ron, but he may not still be on. I do that long pause so that the mute button can be found. All right, anybody in the southwest sector?
Yeah, and I have a professional radio voice for you. If you want to email me, I can get you connected with him for the narration.
And I'll get you his email.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
See, I know Sharon got covered by the Hub in a Box discussion. Anybody else got anything hot going? And Johnny got something covered too. It's really quiet with COVID. We're all just like, hang on. So let's go up to the central east sector. I have a report from Diane Zahn. She emailed me, or Diane, geez, brain crap. Judkins Park. Diane at Judkins Park. She has all her supplies in her box, and she, like other people, is waiting for Parks to be able to roll it into place and chain it down. So that's good news for her. And then she's getting staged up to do some outreach, depending on whether we get the video done or she can ever do it in person. That's the only report I know of for Southeast, or excuse me, Central East. Anybody else in Central East? It'd help if I get the real map out here. Okay, how about Central West?
Bill, you got anything?
Well, I don't have much news for Queen Anne Hub, just that MICWA itself meets regularly, and we're working on getting things sort of organized here in our sector, Central West sector. Other than that, I don't know whether Frank, you have anything, or maybe Catherine has something to add.
No, not at this point, other than just, we usually get together every day at 1300 when we can make it. And that involves planning for hubs and for radio. There's about 5 of us who meet pretty regularly for that. So
If only we could meet in a restaurant. I mean, I can't wait for phase 2. Okay, Monday. So then we'll go to the northwest sector.
Nope, pass.
Well, that was fast. Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Anybody else up there?
Um,
North Central?
I'm gonna pass.
am I northwest?
Well, you're all gonna get crammed into Northwest. I kind of go North Central, Northwest, just to make sure everybody wakes up and goes, oh yeah.
Okay.
Darren, you're on my screen, and James. So James, go ahead and go first. Jack, I'm sorry.
Oh, we haven't done anything within our pub, and no big surprise. But I did want to say I was involved in the GMRS radio check earlier this week with Ann's group, and I guess what it proved to me was just how important those repeaters are, and making sure that those repeaters are hardened in whatever way is possible to make them usable after any kind of a major event, especially an earthquake. It seemed to me that as little as we could talk to each other in the example, the test tryout we did on Simplex, repeaters are a very important thing.
Darren, did you have something you were going to add?
No, I'm just gonna pass.
Okay. Anybody else up there in Northwest?
Pass.
And Northeast?
Lake City doesn't have anything.
Okay.
I was in on, this is Gabrielle, I was in on the radio activity and that was great fun. And somehow I'd never gotten a radio license, but I got one today, yay.
Yay.
So that was exciting. And it was really fun to be on the radio.
Yep, it really is. It seems intimidating, but it really is fun. So, well, good. I mean, I gave us plenty of time to do around the room, although my brain never adjusts to going, oh yeah, COVID, not much going on. So speaking of COVID, I've gotten 2 requests from different hub captains saying, are they going to think about doing pop-up clinics or vaccinations at hubs? So I had a couple conversations with people in the city. They are so focused on the gigantic, CenturyLink field size events that they are not down to, neighborhood level. But there's some discussion about getting the messaging out about when vaccinations start happening at your local pharmacies or some of the other places we would expect them to normally happen, helping make sure that those places are set up and ready for all your community members, like ADA accommodations. So that's one topic that might come up later. And the other is, I was told once they get past these big things, then they might come back and go, well, where are suitable hub locations that we might set them up? I mean, I know some of the small pea patches aren't going to work, but some of you have hubs in pretty large locations, and might be a consideration if you are out in a neighborhood where there hasn't been a big event already happening. And it's not necessarily saying that you would be asked to be volunteers at it, but if you're vaccinated, you'd be welcome to be at it. We still don't understand how they're going to call for volunteers other than right now. I think the furthest they've gotten is into the retired medical professionals. They're calling them in to help with vaccinations, along with the Medical Reserve Corps. So that's kind of where we are. Oh yeah, Lumen Field, I know, the Lou, that's what I heard. So that's where we are in vaccination sort of information. Is just all swirling all around us, and we're waiting for it to stabilize. Does anybody else have questions or anything? And if not, I'll talk about our next 2 upcoming meetings. Questions? You guys all want to go home early, don't you? So next hub captains, the regular hub captains meetings, it's still every other month. Unless somebody has a compelling reason for us to change it, I'm just going to keep plugging along at that. So it'll be March 25th. Please think about volunteering to help alternate with Gabrielle so that we have secretarial relief. I will continue. COVID has really screwed up everybody's plans. And my plan was to stop leading meetings this year, but COVID has not given us any kind of a chance for me to do apprenticeship with anyone or get someone comfortable in doing it. So I'll keep plugging along. I now know that I can do it from an RV, so that's a good thing. Our next deep dive is going to be on Tuesday, February 9th. We're continuing the topic from last week on sheltering. Kayla is going to help take a lead on that with proposing an update to what we have in our hub books as sheltering, which we know is kind of not adequate right now with the COVID changes that need to come in and some other stuff we've learned. And I told the city person in charge of the division that handles sheltering, and she was kind of excited. So at least I know she would now be available to come talk with us and review what we're talking about for different sheltering. And we want to make sure we include talking this time about sheltering in parks, because not everybody's going to want to be inside a building. We know shelters are all around people just getting into tents and going out in a park. We've had Ann and I had seen a presentation from someone who does security at Burning Man. So if you want to talk about ad hoc sheltering, but in a very controlled way, so we're going to see if we can get him to give a short presentation just out of general interest. So those are the two upcoming meetings. If you have any agenda items for the Hub Captains meetings in March, let me know. And then it sounds like I'll have to keep you guys informed of when Matt might want to engage to have a discussion about evacuations. So, okay, I have a question. I'm trying to see if this is one that needs to go to everyone. No, I got a question that said vaccinations for homebound people may be something hubs get help with. I don't think they're going to let us help with homebound people unless we are medically trained. So, and they're definitely not down to, going to people's homes. They're still in the, you must come to us. So I think that's the answer to that, unless anybody knows anything better. Anne, do you know? Have you heard anything? I doubt it. Yeah.
I really meant just by coordinating and finding where the people are that are homebound that want the shot.
Okay. Well, look, I'll stick that in the back of my mind, see what we hear. All right. Anybody else got anything?
Nope.
All right. I thank you all for hanging out. We get out early. You can go have some ice cream for dessert. That's what I always think of. If I end early, I get to treat myself. All right. We'll have this posted and up on the web in about a day or so, and the minutes out in a couple of days. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Cindy, can I talk to you?
Bye, everybody.
Yep, I'm gonna stop recording.
Hey,
Thanks,
Anne,
Cindy.
are you still there? Did she leave? Oh, she's gone. All right, I'll email.